Electricity after officials switched off the Soviet-era grid transmission lines in preparation to join the rest of Europe. This has come in more than 3 decades after the collapse of the Soviet Union and in the Baltic's final ties to oil and gas-rich Russia. For the 3 countries, as well as the rest of Europe, the move is steeped in geopolitical and symbolic significance. The Baltic countries, which are all NATO members, have often had chilly ties since declaring independence from the USSR in 1990. Relations soured further when Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022. 16 power lines that used to connect the Baltic states with Russia and Belarus have been dismantled. Leaders of all 3 countries have assured their nations that the shift would go smoothly. Let's bring in geopolitical analyst Dr. Bola Adediran. He joins me live from the United Kingdom. Dr. Adediran, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Nifemi.
What message do you think this sends to Russia, given what appears the tense relationships between Russia and the Baltic countries, particularly since the invasion of Ukraine?
I think this is clearly an attempt to reduce Russia's influence further in the region, and for Kremlin, this is not great news at all, because what started the war in Ukraine itself was the attempt by Ukraine to decouple from Russia and move towards the EU. And what we've seen since February 2022, is that rather than Russia starve off countries that were formerly within its sphere of influence from joining the EU, what it's actually effectively done is that it's pushed more countries into the hands of the EU. So this definitely reduces Russia's geopolitical influence in the region further. And it's great news for the Baltic countries, because it means that a soft underbelly, which Russia could easily have weaponized. Russia has a history of weaponizing energy dependence. Look at what it's doing in Ukraine, where it's occupied the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant for years now. And so this definitely helps the Baltic countries to ensure their own energy security.
How do you see this development really impact on the dynamics within NATO, given the Baltic countries' membership in the alliance?
Well, I think that this is also sort of a concerning period for these Baltic countries. Don't forget they're members of the NATO, as you have mentioned. And then we also have a new president in the White House who is not as committed to NATO as we would like. And if Russia sees this as an affront, it might want to test the extent of US's commitment to NATO and to the Baltic countries. Would Donald Trump come to the aid of the Baltic countries if Russia begins aggressive acts towards these Baltic countries? Becomes that is remains to be seen. So I think this is a critical point, a critical moment for these countries, even though they've decoupled from Russia and they've now latched onto the European power grid. It's also a point where Russia may want to, test exactly the extent to which Donald Trump is willing to defend NATO, particularly these Baltic countries, and Russia may begin to, launch soft attack on these countries, for example, attacking using disinformation or using sort of subterfuge methods to stir up tensions within these countries.
Absolutely. Precisely what implications could this have for Russia's relationships with other European countries, particularly those that are still reliant on Russian energy exports?
Well, I think that one of the things that we have been seeing is that even though the EU has said that that it wants to completely end energy dependence on Russia by 2027, there is still clearly a lot of areas in which the EU depends on Russia. And they're doing this, being careful of, at the same time, not putting money into Russia's coffers so that it can continue to prosecute its war in Ukraine. But at the same time, they also have to find a balancing act to ensure that while they are decoupling, they are not also stirring up inflation in their own countries. You would recall that before the war in Ukraine, Europe was highly dependent on Russia's energy imports, right? So they had 45% of natural gas imports from to the EU was from Russia, and that has significantly dropped now. But there's still areas, for example, where that is increasing. For example, liquefied natural gas. There is an increase in imports from Russia. So there is still a bit of areas in which Russia can exercise a lot of influence on the EU.
Dr. Adedero, we have to go now. I guess time will also tell how China views this development, considering its own interest in European energy markets and strategic partnership with Russia. Dr. Bola Adedero, live for us in the UK. Thank you for your thoughts.
Thank you for having me.
In an incident that has shocked the nation, a teacher has reportedly stabbed fatally an 8-year-old girl at an elementary school in South Korea. The female teacher, who is in her 40s, confessed to stabbing the student. Police says the girl was found with stab wounds beside her teacher on the second floor of a school building and was pronounced dead at the hospital. South Korea's acting president, Cho Sun-mok, has ordered an investigation into the case, asking authorities to implement necessary measures to ensure such incidents never happen again. And finally, on the news, back in Africa, the trial of 84 Congolese soldiers accused of murder, rape, and other crimes against civilians in the eastern part of the Democratic Republic of Congo has opened. The soldiers are accused of having broken into civilian homes in several villages of the eastern province of South Kivu over the weekend, raping several women and killing at least 12 people. The civil rights groups are requesting the death penalty for all of the accused soldiers. March last year, Congo lifted more than a 20-year moratorium on the death penalty. The decision was vehemently criticized by human rights activists. The last execution took place in 2003.